The small diplomatic ship called the Olive Branch moved slowly toward the massive space station. Inside the ship, a man named Marcus Cole stood at the window and watched the station grow larger. It was the biggest thing he had ever seen built by living creatures. The Galactic Council station stretched across the darkness of space like a metal flower with 1,000 petals. Lights blinked across its surface in patterns that meant nothing to human eyes. Marcus was 53 years old. His hair had turned gray at the temples, and thin scars crossed his hands like old rivers on a map. He wore a simple black suit with a small Earth flag on his chest. Nothing about him looked special. Nothing about him looked dangerous. That was exactly how he wanted it. The ship's computer announced their arrival in a calm voice. Marcus picked up a single bag and walked to the airlock. He had waited 20 years for humanity to reach this moment. 20 years since the first alien signals were detected. 20 years of careful communication, slow trust building, and endless negotiations. Now humanity would finally meet the Galactic Council face to face. The airlock opened with a soft hiss. Marcus stepped onto the station and felt the artificial gravity pull at his bones. It was slightly stronger than Earth's gravity, which meant his legs would ache by the end of each day. He had trained for this. He had trained for everything. A group of aliens waited for him in the docking bay. Marcus recognized their species from the briefing files. The tall one with blue skin and 4 arms was a Thessian. The short creature covered in brown fur was a Maloki. The thing that looked like a walking crystal was a Vorn. None of them smiled, because none of their species could smile. But Marcus could read their body language. They were not happy to see him. The Thessian stepped forward. "You are the human representative. I am Ambassador Marcus Cole," he said. "I bring greetings from the people of Earth." The Thessian made a sound that might have been a laugh. "One small ship, one human. This is what your species sends to meet the council?" "We are a humble people," Marcus said. "We come to learn, not to impress." This was a lie, but a useful one. Earth had chosen to send a single representative precisely because it would make humanity seem weak and non-threatening. The council was made up of 347 species. Some of them had traveled between stars for millions of years. Humanity was new, young, and alone. The smart move was to appear harmless. The aliens led Marcus through the station's corridors. He memorized every turn, every door, every security camera. This was an old habit that he could not break. His eyes scanned for exits, for cover, for anything that could be used as a weapon. The diplomatic part of his brain told him to stop. The other part of his brain, the part that had kept him alive through things no human should survive, told him to keep watching. They gave him quarters in the lower section of the station. The room was small and smelled like chemicals that made his eyes water. The bed was designed for a species with 3 legs, which meant it was nearly impossible for a human to sleep on. The food dispenser offered 17,000 meal options, and not a single one was safe for human biology. Marcus set down his bag and smiled. They were testing him already. He spent his first week learning the station's layout. The council met in a massive chamber at the station's center, where representatives from hundreds of worlds argued about trade routes and border disputes. Marcus was allowed to watch but not to speak. He sat in the back row and listened to debates conducted in a dozen languages, all translated by the small device in his ear. The other ambassadors ignored him. Some of them looked at him with curiosity, the way a scientist might look at an interesting insect. Others looked at him with something closer to disgust. Humans were primitives who had barely learned to leave their own planet. They were not worth attention. Marcus did not mind being ignored. It gave him time to watch, to learn, to understand who held power in this place and how they used it. He noticed High Arbiter Thesix on his 3rd day. She was a tall creature with scales that shifted color based on her mood. Her species, the Dominion, controlled nearly a quarter of the council's territory. She spoke rarely in the open sessions, but other ambassadors watched her constantly. When she moved, they moved. When she frowned, conversation stopped. Thesix noticed Marcus watching her. For a long moment, their eyes met across the crowded chamber. Her scales turned a dark purple color that Marcus did not recognize. Then she looked away, and Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had seen that look before. 23 years ago, on a small colony world called Kepler 442b, a warlord had looked at him the same way. That warlord had commanded a fleet of ships and an army of soldiers. He had looked at the human colonists and seen nothing but targets. 40,000 people had died on Kepler 442b. Men, women, children. Marcus had watched his wife die in his arms. He had held his daughter's hand as she took her last breath. He had buried everyone he loved in the red soil of that distant world. And then he had done something about it. The galaxy knew him by another name now. The Hollow Man, the ghost of Kepler. Death in human form. He had spent 5 years hunting the warlord and everyone who served him. He had torn apart their organization, piece by piece, ship by ship, life by life. When he finally found the warlord himself, hiding in a fortress that was supposed to be impenetrable, Marcus had walked in through the front door. No one ever found the warlord's body. Some said the Hollow Man had eaten him. Others said he had been scattered across a dozen star systems. The truth was simpler and more terrible. But Marcus kept that truth locked away in the darkest corners of his memory. He had retired after that, buried the Hollow Man so deep that even Earth's intelligence agencies believed he was dead. He had accepted this diplomatic posting because humanity needed someone who understood how dangerous the galaxy really was. Now sitting in the council chamber, Marcus watched Thesix and recognized the look in her eyes. She was planning something. She saw humanity as a threat to be eliminated before it could grow strong. Marcus could have told her that threatening humanity was a mistake. He could have warned her about what happened to the last person who tried to hurt his people. But he was a diplomat now, a man of peace. The Hollow Man was dead. At least that was what he kept telling himself. 3 weeks passed on the station. Marcus learned to sleep on the strange bed by folding his body into uncomfortable shapes. He learned which foods from the dispenser would not poison him. He learned to breathe through his mouth when the chemical smell in his quarters became too strong. He also learned that someone was trying to kill him. The first attempt was subtle. The atmospheric controls in his quarters changed one night while he slept. The oxygen levels dropped slowly, replaced by a gas that would have killed most humans within an hour. Marcus woke up with a headache and a burning sensation in his lungs. His modified body had filtered out most of the poison, but it had been a close thing. He reported the malfunction to station maintenance. They apologized and blamed old equipment. Marcus smiled and accepted their explanation. Then he installed his own atmospheric monitor and started sleeping with a portable oxygen supply. The second attempt came through his food. Someone had added a compound to the nutrient paste that would have caused his heart to stop. Marcus detected it by smell alone. His senses had been enhanced years ago, along with the rest of his body. The modifications were classified technology that officially did not exist. Earth government had given them to him after Kepler, when they realized what he was planning to do. He ate the poisoned food anyway. His body neutralized it within minutes. He did not report this attempt to anyone. The third attempt was more direct. A maintenance hatch above his bed came loose one night and fell toward his skull. Marcus caught it with one hand without opening his eyes. The hatch weighed nearly 40 kilograms. A normal human would have been crushed. Someone on this station wanted him dead. Marcus had a good idea who that someone was. He continued his diplomatic work as if nothing had happened. He attended council sessions and sat quietly in the back. He met with minor ambassadors who were curious about humanity. He answered their questions politely and asked his own questions even more politely. He learned about trade agreements and territorial disputes and ancient grudges that had lasted for thousands of years. Ambassador Kethra of the Soluri people became something close to a friend. The Soluri were small beings with large eyes and gentle voices. They had been among the first species to respond positively to human contact. Kethra had visited Earth once and spoke fondly of its blue oceans and green forests. One evening, Kethra invited Marcus to share a meal in her quarters. Her food was actually compatible with human biology, which made it the first real meal Marcus had eaten in weeks. They talked about their homeworlds and their families. Marcus did not mention his wife or daughter. Some wounds never healed. After the meal, Kethra's expression became serious. Her large eyes blinked rapidly, which Marcus had learned was a sign of worry. "You must be careful, Ambassador Cole," she said. "There are those on this station who do not want humanity to succeed." I have noticed, Marcus said. It is worse than you know. High Arbiter Thesix has been meeting with the Dominion faction in private. They are planning something. I do not know what, but I know it involves you. Marcus nodded slowly. Do you know why she hates humans so much? We have never done anything to her people. Kethra hesitated. The Dominion believes that young species should be controlled before they become threats. They have done this many times before. They find reasons to isolate new species, to limit their growth, to keep them weak. Sometimes they do worse things. What kind of worse things? Kethra did not answer. She did not need to. Marcus already knew about species that had been quietly erased from the galaxy's history. Entire civilizations that had been destroyed before they could become powerful enough to challenge the existing order. Earth's intelligence agencies had found hints of these extinctions hidden in old records and forgotten databases. Humanity could be next. Marcus thanked Kethra for the warning and returned to his quarters. He sat in the darkness for a long time, thinking about what he should do. The diplomatic answer was to gather evidence, build alliances, and fight back through political channels. That could take years, decades. Humanity might not have that much time. The other answer was simpler. Find Thesix. Find everyone who served her. End them all. No. He was not that person anymore. He had promised himself that the Hollow Man would stay buried. He had promised his wife's memory that he would find another way. The next morning, Thesix made her move. Marcus arrived at the council chamber to find the seats arranged differently. Instead of the usual circular pattern, they now formed a semicircle facing a single platform in the center. The platform was empty. It was clearly meant for someone to stand on while others judged them. High Arbiter Thesix stood at the front of the chamber. Her scales glowed a satisfied shade of yellow. She waited until all the ambassadors had taken their seats, then raised one clawed hand for silence. Fellow members of the Galactic Council, she announced, I bring grave charges against the species known as humanity. I present evidence that they are dangerous, aggressive, and unfit for membership in our community. I demand a tribunal of character to determine whether their representatives should be expelled and their species isolated. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some ambassadors looked shocked. Others looked excited. A few looked directly at Marcus with something like pity in their eyes. Thesix continued speaking. She described alleged attacks on peaceful trading vessels. She showed recordings of human soldiers committing atrocities. She read testimony from witnesses who claimed to have survived human aggression. All of it was fake. Marcus recognized the signs immediately. The recordings were edited. The testimony was rehearsed. The evidence had been manufactured by experts who knew exactly what they were doing. He could expose it all. He had enough experience with information warfare to tear apart every lie Thesix had constructed. But that would require revealing skills that a simple diplomat should not have. It would raise questions about who Marcus Cole really was. Instead, he stood up calmly and asked permission to speak. Thesix smiled, which for her species meant baring rows of sharp teeth. Of course, Ambassador. You may respond to these charges. I do not wish to respond, Marcus said. I accept the tribunal. The chamber fell silent. Even Thesix looked surprised. You accept? She repeated. Yes, humanity has nothing to hide. We welcome the opportunity to prove our peaceful intentions. Thesix's scales flickered through several colors before settling on dark red. She had expected him to protest, to argue, to make himself look defensive and guilty. His calm acceptance had disrupted her plan, but only slightly. She recovered quickly and announced that the tribunal would begin in 3 days. Marcus would have that long to prepare his defense. 3 days. Marcus returned to his quarters and began planning, not for the tribunal itself. He already knew he would lose that battle. Thesix had too many allies and too much fake evidence. No, Marcus was planning for what would come after, for the moment when Thesix would reveal her true intentions, for the moment when she would try to finish what she had started. The Hollow Man was still dead, but Marcus Cole had not survived this long by being unprepared. The tribunal began on a morning that felt no different from any other. The station's artificial lights came on at the same time. The air still smelled like chemicals. The gravity still pulled at Marcus's bones, but everything had changed. Marcus walked into the council chamber wearing his simple black suit. He had shaved carefully and combed his gray hair back from his face. He looked like what he was supposed to be, a tired diplomat facing impossible odds. He did not look like a weapon. The chamber was packed with representatives from every species in the council. Some had traveled for days to witness this event. The trial of humanity's first ambassador was entertainment for beings who had grown bored with their long, immortal lives. Marcus took his place on the central platform. He stood alone in a circle of light while hundreds of alien eyes watched him from the shadows. The platform was designed to make the accused feel small and exposed. Marcus had stood in worse places. High Arbiter Thesix rose from her seat at the front of the chamber. Her scales gleamed with barely contained satisfaction. She had worked toward this moment for months. Every piece was in place. Every ally had been bought or threatened into cooperation. The human would be found guilty, expelled from the station, and then quietly eliminated. His death would be blamed on an accident during his journey home. Earth would have no proof of what really happened. "This tribunal will now come to order," Thesix announced. "We are gathered to examine the character of humanity through its representative, Ambassador Marcus Cole. The charges are as follows: aggression against peaceful species, destruction of property, murder of innocent beings, in general unfitness for membership in the Galactic community." She began presenting her evidence. Recording after recording showed humans committing terrible acts. Soldiers shooting unarmed civilians. Ships bombing defenseless colonies. Prisoners being tortured in dark cells. The images were disturbing and effective. Marcus watched without expression. He had seen real atrocities. He knew what genuine footage of violence looked like. These recordings were too clean, too perfectly framed, too conveniently damning. They had been created in a studio somewhere by experts in manipulation. But the council did not know that. They watched with growing horror as Thesix painted humanity as a species of monsters. Some ambassadors looked away. Others whispered to each other in their own languages. The translation device in Marcus's ear picked up words like dangerous and eliminate and threat. Thesix called witness after witness. Each one told stories of human cruelty. Each one had details that sounded convincing, unless you knew how to spot rehearsed testimony. Marcus knew. He had conducted interrogations for years. He recognized the rhythm of memorized lines. The tribunal continued for hours. Marcus was allowed to ask questions, but every question he asked was dismissed or redirected. The rules had been designed to make defense impossible. This was not a trial, it was a performance. Finally, Thesix presented her final witness. "I call forward Drexel Vorn," she announced, "survivor of the human attack on Vexari Outpost 7. A creature walked into the chamber. He was tall and thin with gray skin and black eyes that reflected no light. His species was Vexari, the same species that had produced the warlord who destroyed Kepler 442b. Marcus felt something cold move through his chest. He knew this creature. Drexel Vorn took his place before the council and began telling his story. He described a peaceful trading outpost. He described human ships appearing without warning. He described explosions and screams and death. He described being the only survivor, hiding among corpses until the humans left. His voice cracked with emotion. His hands trembled as he spoke. It was a perfect performance. Marcus watched Drexel's face and remembered where he had seen it before. 20 years ago, in a fortress on a distant world. Drexel Vorn had been a lieutenant in the warlord's army. He had personally overseen the massacre of 3,000 colonists in the northern settlement of Kepler 442b. Marcus had watched recordings of him laughing as families burned. Drexel had escaped the Hollow Man's revenge by fleeing to the far edges of the galaxy. He had changed his name and hidden among species who did not know his crimes. He had survived because Marcus had eventually stopped hunting. There were always more guilty ones, and even the Hollow Man could not kill them all. Now here he was, testifying against humanity, using lies to destroy the species he had tried to exterminate 2 decades ago. Something shifted behind Marcus's eyes. It was small, just a flicker of movement that no one in the chamber could see. But inside his mind, a door that had been sealed for 7 years began to crack open. Thesix finished her questions and turned to Marcus with triumph in her expression. Does the human representative wish to question this witness? Marcus stood very still for a long moment. The chamber was silent. Hundreds of beings held their breath, waiting to see what the helpless human would do. Yes, Marcus said. His voice was quiet and calm. I have one question. He walked toward Drexel slowly. The Vexari's confident expression began to waver. Something about the way the human moved was wrong. Too smooth, too controlled, like a predator approaching prey. Marcus stopped 3 steps away from Drexel. He looked into those empty black eyes and saw recognition dawn. Drexel knew. Somehow, impossibly, he knew who was standing in front of him. My question is simple, Marcus said. Do you remember what the Hollow Man said to your master before the end? The words hung in the air like poison. Drexel's gray skin turned white. His entire body began to shake. He looked at Marcus and saw 20 years of nightmares standing before him in a diplomat suit. No, Drexel whispered. No, you cannot be. You are dead. They said you were dead. I was, Marcus replied, but I came back. Drexel screamed. It was not a scream of anger or defiance. It was the sound of absolute terror ripping free from a creature who had thought himself safe. He turned and ran toward the nearest exit, shoving aside ambassadors who were too shocked to stop him. The chamber erupted into chaos. Voices shouted in 100 languages. Ambassadors demanded explanations. Guards rushed toward the exits to stop the fleeing witness. Thesix stood frozen, watching her carefully constructed plan fall apart. She did not understand what had just happened. She did not know who Marcus Cole really was, but she knew that something had gone terribly wrong. She made a decision. The backup plan would have to do. Thesix raised her hand and spoke a single word into her communication device. Throughout the station, 30 soldiers who had been waiting in hidden positions received their orders. They moved toward the council chamber with weapons drawn. The official story would be that the human had attacked first, that he had threatened the council and needed to be stopped. There would be no witnesses who disagreed, because anyone who disagreed would be silenced. The doors to the chamber burst open. Armed soldiers poured into the room, their weapons aimed at the center platform where Marcus Cole stood alone. Thesix smiled. Whatever trick the human had used on her witness, it would not save him now. She was wrong. The soldiers spread across the chamber in perfect formation. They were professionals, trained by the best military academies in the Dominion. Their armor could stop most weapons. Their guns could cut through starship hulls. They moved with the confidence of warriors who had never faced anything they could not kill. There were 30 of them. They surrounded Marcus in a circle of death, weapons aimed at his chest, his head, his heart. Any one of their shots would have killed an ordinary human instantly. Marcus stood very still on the central platform. He watched the soldiers take their positions. He counted their weapons. He measured the distances between them. His enhanced mind processed everything in fractions of a second. The ambassadors in the chamber scrambled for cover. Some hid behind their seats. Others pressed against the walls. A few ran for the exits, only to find more soldiers blocking their escape. This was not meant to be witnessed. Everyone in the room was now a prisoner. Thesix walked forward until she stood just outside the circle of soldiers. Her scales had turned a deep crimson color, the shade of victory. Ambassador Cole, she said, you are charged with threatening the safety of this council. You will surrender yourself for immediate execution. Marcus looked at her. His expression had not changed. He still wore the calm face of a diplomat discussing trade agreements. I have threatened no one, he said. Your witness ran because he recognized me. That is not a crime. Your presence here is the crime, Thesix replied. Humanity does not belong among civilized species. You are too young, too violent, too dangerous. This council made a mistake by allowing you observer status. We are correcting that mistake now. She raised her hand to give the order to fire. Before you do that, Marcus said, I want to tell you something about humans. Thesix paused. She was curious despite herself. What could this creature possibly say that would matter? We are not the strongest species in the galaxy, Marcus continued. We are not the oldest. We do not have the best technology or the largest fleets. We are small and new and fragile compared to most of you. He looked around at the ambassadors hiding behind their seats. His eyes found Kethra among them, watching with fear and confusion on her gentle face. But we have one quality that makes us different from every other species I have met here. We do not stop. When something hurts us, we do not run away. We do not hide. We do not surrender. We learn. We adapt. We get stronger. And then we come back. His voice had changed. It was still quiet. But something cold had crept into it. Something that made several of the soldiers shift nervously despite their training. 23 years ago, an army like yours attacked a human colony. They killed 40,000 people. Men, women, children. They burned our homes and laughed while they did it. They thought we were weak. They thought we would accept our loss and move on. Marcus smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. They were wrong. He moved. The soldiers saw nothing but a blur. One moment the human was standing on the platform. The next moment he was among them, moving faster than their eyes could track. The first soldier lost his weapon before he could fire. Marcus twisted the gun from his grip and drove an elbow into the joint between his helmet and armor. The soldier dropped without making a sound. The others tried to react. They were elite warriors with centuries of combined experience. They had trained for every possible combat scenario. They had never trained for this. Marcus flowed through them like water through sand. His body moved in ways that should have been impossible for a human. Every strike was precise, landing exactly where it needed to land to disable without killing. Joints bent in wrong directions. Weapons shattered under impacts that cracked armor. Soldiers collapsed one after another, their nervous systems overloaded by carefully targeted blows. 10 soldiers fell in the first 5 seconds. The remaining 20 tried to form a defensive formation. They fired their weapons at where Marcus had been, scorching the floor and walls. He was never where they aimed. He was behind them, beside them, inside their formation before they could react. 20 soldiers fell in the next 10 seconds. The last 10 broke formation and tried to flee. Marcus caught each of them before they reached the doors. He did not chase them. He simply appeared in front of them, moving faster than their minds could process. Each one went down with a single strike. 30 soldiers, 40 seconds, not one of them dead. Marcus stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by groaning bodies and scattered weapons. He was not breathing hard. His heart rate had not increased. He had not even wrinkled his suit. He walked toward Thesix. The High Arbiter stumbled backward, her scales flashing through colors too fast to track. She had never seen anything like this. No one in the chamber had. The human moved like a machine designed for violence, efficient and unstoppable. "You asked about humans," Marcus said as he approached. "Let me tell you what we are." He stopped one step away from her. She could have touched him if she reached out. She did not reach out. We are the species that looked at the stars and decided to reach them with rockets made of fire. We are the species that split the atom and chose not to destroy ourselves. We are the species that buried its dead after every war and then built something better from the ashes. His eyes locked with hers. They were not the eyes of a diplomat. They were the eyes of something ancient and terrible wearing a human face. We are the species that remembers. We remember every wrong done to us. We remember every enemy who thought we were weak, and we remember what happened to them. He turned away from Thesix and walked toward the center of the chamber. Every ambassador watched him. Every camera in the room was recording. This broadcast was reaching every world in the Council's domain. "I came here to build peace," Marcus announced to the watching galaxy. "I sat quietly while you insulted my people. I ate your poisoned food and slept in rooms filled with toxic gas. I allowed you to put me on trial for crimes humanity never committed. I did this because my species wants allies, not enemies." He paused and looked directly into the nearest camera. "But you needed to understand something. We are not prey. We have never been prey. We survived ice ages and plagues and wars that killed millions. We survived everything our own planet could throw at us, and then we left that planet and reached for the stars." His voice softened but lost none of its power. "I am not the strongest human. I am not the most dangerous. I am just the one they sent because I know how to be patient. But make no mistake, if you threaten humanity again, others will come. and they will not be as merciful as I have been today." He looked at the soldiers lying on the floor, still alive, still breathing. "Remember that I could have killed every one of them. I chose not to. Remember that choice the next time you think about attacking my people." The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then slowly the ambassadors began to emerge from their hiding places. Some of them looked at Marcus with fear. Others looked at him with something that might have been respect. Ambassador Kethra walked forward and stood beside Marcus. Her large eyes were wet with emotion, but she held her head high. "I stand with humanity," she said clearly, "today and always." One by one, other ambassadors stepped forward, not all of them, not even most of them, but enough. Species that had been bullied by the Dominion for centuries. Species that had seen their own people crushed under Thessix's rule. They gathered behind the human who had just shown the galaxy that power was not the only measure of worth. Thessix stood alone, abandoned by allies who had only followed her out of fear. Her scales had turned a pale, sickly color. She had lost everything in 40 seconds. Marcus looked at her one final time. "I could destroy you," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "I could take apart everything you have built and leave you with nothing. But I am not going to do that. I am going to let the Council decide your fate, because that is what humans do. We build systems of justice instead of systems of revenge. We believe that even our enemies deserve fair treatment." He turned and walked away, leaving the most powerful being in the Dominion standing alone in the ruins of her own ambition. The Hollow Man had shown himself to the galaxy. Now Marcus Cole would show them something even more frightening. Mercy. The days following the tribunal were chaos. The recording of Marcus Cole defeating 30 soldiers spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Every species with access to communication networks watched the footage again and again. They analyzed his movements. They debated his words. They argued about what it meant for the future. Some called him a monster. They said that humans were too dangerous to be allowed into the Council. They demanded that Earth be isolated, quarantined, destroyed before the species could spread further. Others called him a hero. They said that he had done what no one else dared to do. He had stood up to the Dominion and won. He had shown that power without wisdom was weakness, and that mercy was the greatest strength of all. The Council itself fell into emergency sessions that lasted for 3 days without rest. Ambassadors who had never agreed on anything found themselves arguing about humanity's fate. Old alliances shattered, new alliances formed. The political landscape of the galaxy shifted in ways that would take decades to fully understand. High Arbiter Thessix was removed from her position on the second day. Evidence began appearing from anonymous sources, documents and recordings that revealed her corruption. She had not just plotted against humanity. She had been involved in 17 illegal operations spanning centuries. She had ordered the destruction of 3 emerging species before they could become threats. She had personally approved the massacre on Kepler 442b. The evidence was devastating and impossible to deny. Some ambassadors whispered that the Hollow Man had provided it. Others said that human intelligence agencies had been gathering information for years, waiting for the right moment to release it. Marcus said nothing. He attended the Council sessions and sat quietly in the back, just as he had done since his arrival. He answered questions when asked. He provided testimony when required. He behaved exactly like a diplomat should behave. The Dominion faction collapsed without Thessix to hold it together. Species that had followed her out of fear now rushed to distance themselves from her crimes. Alliances that had lasted for thousands of years dissolved overnight. The balance of power in the Council shifted toward more moderate voices. On the third day, the Council voted on humanity's status. The vote was not close. 312 species voted in favor of granting humanity full membership. 23 voted against, 12 abstained. It was the fastest elevation in Council history. A species that had been considered primitive newcomers was now recognized as equal partners in galactic civilization. Ambassador Kethra brought Marcus the news personally. She found him in his quarters, staring out the window at the stars. "Congratulations, Ambassador," she said. "Your people are now members of the Council." Marcus nodded slowly. He did not smile. "Thank you for standing with us, Kethra. It meant more than you know. You would have won without me. After what happened in that chamber, no one wanted to be on the wrong side of humanity. That is not why I wanted allies. Marcus turned to face her. I did not come here to frighten the galaxy into accepting us. I came here to show them that we could be trusted, that we would fight for what is right, not just for ourselves. Kethra tilted her head, a gesture of confusion among her people. You succeeded in both. Did I? Marcus walked to his bag and began packing his few possessions. They respect us now, but respect built on fear is fragile. It breaks the moment someone stronger comes along. Then why did you reveal yourself? You could have found another way. Marcus paused, holding a small photograph in his hands. It showed a woman and a young girl, both smiling at the camera. His wife and daughter, taken years before Kepler. Because some things are worth more than safety, he said quietly. Those soldiers would have killed everyone in that chamber to silence the witnesses. Hundreds of innocent beings. I could not let that happen, not even to protect my secrets. Kethra watched him for a long moment. You are a strange creature, Marcus Cole. You carry so much violence inside you, but you choose peace. Why? Marcus put the photograph away and closed his bag. Because I have seen what violence creates. Empty rooms, broken families, graves that stretch to the horizon. I have done terrible things in my life, Kethra. Necessary things, maybe, but terrible all the same. Every time I close my eyes, I see the faces of those I have killed. He turned to face her. Peace is harder than war. It requires more strength, more patience, more courage. But it is the only thing worth fighting for. The only thing that gives meaning to all the suffering. A soft chime interrupted them. A message had arrived for Marcus. He opened it and read the contents, his expression unreadable. The new Vexari delegation wants to meet with me, he said. They wish to discuss reparations for Kepler 442b. They are offering to extradite war criminals that their previous government protected. That is remarkable, Kethra said. The Vexari have never admitted wrongdoing to anyone. They are afraid of what happens if they refuse. Marcus set down the message. They saw the footage. They know what I did to their warlords' organization. They are choosing cooperation over confrontation. Is that not what you wanted? It is what I needed. Whether it is what I wanted, he shook his head. I do not know anymore. Marcus accepted the meeting with the Vexari delegation. He sat across from beings whose species had murdered everyone he loved, and he negotiated terms for peace. He did not threaten them. He did not remind them of what he could do. He simply talked to them as equals, as partners in building a better future. The negotiations lasted for weeks. When they concluded, the Vexari had agreed to pay reparations to the families of Kepler survivors. They had agreed to hand over officers who had participated in the massacre. They had agreed to support humanity's integration into the galactic community. It was more than Marcus had ever dared hope for, and somehow it felt hollow. On his last night on the station, Marcus sat alone in his quarters. He had been given better rooms after the tribunal, quarters designed for important ambassadors. The bed was comfortable. The food was safe. The air smelled like flowers from a distant world. He should have felt satisfied. He had accomplished everything he came here to do. Humanity had won. But the hollow man was still there, waiting in the shadows of his mind. The door he had opened during the tribunal had not fully closed. He could feel it calling to him, whispering that there were still enemies to destroy, still wrongs to avenge, still justice to be served. A knock came at his door. Marcus opened it to find a young human woman in a diplomatic uniform. She was one of the new attachés that Earth had sent now that humanity had full membership. Ambassador Cole, I'm sorry to disturb you. I just wanted to thank you for what you did. Marcus studied her face. She was young, perhaps 25. She had probably been a child when Kepler happened. She did not know what it cost to be what he was. What is your name? He asked. Sarah Chen, sir. I'm assigned to the trade committee. Sarah. Marcus gestured for her to enter. Tell me, why did you want to become a diplomat? She thought about it for a moment. I grew up hearing about the first contact, about how we finally knew we weren't alone in the universe. I wanted to be part of building something new, something that would last. Marcus smiled. It was a small smile, but genuine. That is a good reason. Better than mine. What was your reason, sir, if you don't mind me asking? He looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the red soil of Kepler 422b still held the bones of 40,000 people. His wife, his daughter, everyone he had failed to protect. I wanted to make sure it never happened again, he said. I wanted to build a galaxy where human children could grow up without fear, where no one would ever suffer what we suffered. That sounds like a good reason too. Perhaps. Marcus turned back to face her. Can I give you some advice, Sarah? Something I wish someone had told me when I was your age? She nodded. The work we do here matters. Every treaty we sign, every alliance we build, every hand we extend in friendship. It all matters. But do not lose yourself in the mission. Do not sacrifice your humanity to protect humanity. That is a price that is too high to pay. Sarah looked at him with something like understanding in her eyes. She did not know his full story, but she sensed the weight behind his words. I'll remember that, sir. After she left, Marcus returned to the window. The station had rotated, and now Earth was visible in the distance. A small blue dot against the infinite black. Home. He thought about his wife and daughter. He thought about all the things he had done in their name. He thought about the future that Sarah and millions of others would inherit. The hollow man whispered to him from the shadows. There were still enemies. There would always be enemies. But Marcus Cole chose to listen to another voice. The voice of his daughter, asking him to tell her stories about the stars. The voice of his wife, reminding him that love was stronger than hate. Peace was harder than war, but it was worth fighting for. Marcus picked up his bag and walked toward the docking bay. A new ship was waiting to take him home. Earth had sent their best vessel this time, a sign of the respect humanity had earned. As he walked through the station corridors, aliens of every species stepped aside to let him pass. Some bowed their heads. Others simply watched with careful eyes. They all knew who he was now. They all knew what he could do. But they also knew what he had chosen not to do. And that, Marcus realized, was the most important thing of all. He boarded the ship and took his seat by the window. As the vessel pulled away from the station, Marcus watched the stars stretch into lines of light. Behind him, the galaxy continued to turn. Wars would be fought. Alliances would shift. New threats would emerge. But humanity was part of it now, not as conquerors or victims, but as partners, as builders, as a species that had looked into the darkness and chosen to light a candle instead of cursing the night. The hollow man settled deeper into the shadows of Marcus's mind, patient and eternal. And Marcus Cole, ambassador of Earth, closed his eyes and dreamed of peace.